I find no evidence of that sentiment in your conversation.
Conversation is a place where one plays with ideas.
Quite so.
Quite.
For me, it feels like it was made kind of yesterday, or maybe 100 years ago. You know, it's like it itself becomes a state of mind, having made it. You get so in contact with the mystery of time, its elastic nature, its subjective nature, and so on, that the idea that it was made 18 years ago doesn't seem really, you know. And it took 8 years to develop, yeah. And on the other hand, blink of an eye, open them, there it is again, as if it was, you know, completed yesterday.
What prompted the re-release of the film?
I guess that Sony Classics, to whom I think we all feel very grateful actually that they're doing this, because it's extremely unusual to re-release a film, but they refer to it as an evergreen. In that it didn't really ever go away. You know, it had its theatrical release, which was already quite large at the beginning, and then went to sort of to DVD, or in your case to VHS, and now it's time for people to have the opportunity to see it on the big screen again.
I see. You're here as a casualty of love.
And it first hit me as a film about gender. And now, after seeing it several times, it's more taking on bigger issues, like about journey and birth and return. And in that sense, the meanings kind of shift, do they?
Yes, they do. Just like you've described that you first saw it in terms of gender and then later on in terms of other things. Even I, who made it, find that I have different points of entry into it and different points of interest and identification. And it's as if people see different films because they really do describe it in terms of what preoccupies them most at that moment. And I think those layers and threads and complexity are in Virginia Woolf's original book, but perhaps take a particularly intense form on film.
When you first made the film, I heard you were kind of making it as a kind of reaction against merchant ivory style. Now, like, I heard in the news, there's kind of it's relevant in a new way maybe about the condition of estate homes in England being kind of assumed by National Trust, and that kind of made me think about the film in a different way.
Well, you know, I think the English have always had a complicated relationship with heritage, and you know, there's this whole category called heritage cinema that at the time of making Orlando made us feel a bit sick, I think. This sort of nostalgic looking back to some kind of fictitious era of you know, green country lawns and great big houses and stuff, which was only ever a tiny, weeny percent of the population who lived that way. And of course, you know, Britain's always been a very class-divided society, and so these were kind of emblems of that divided society that one didn't particularly want to celebrate. So the irony of the story of Orlando is that she passes through all those things, but is gradually sheds them and is disinherited from them. So it never felt like a film about the past or a celebration of the past, but rather a film about a letting go of the past.
Right.
An attempt to emerge into a present that wasn't about material things, but about a kind of human spirit.
Now are we kind of moving towards a post-gender kind of culture?
Well, we might have headed about an inch further. I think there's still enormous confusion about gender.
There.
Where you live?
I do.
By yourself?
Well, yes. At the moment.
Are we our biology? You know, if we've got certain kinds of hormones, do we think differently? Or, you know, does the fact that you can reproduce or not reproduce make you into a different kind of person? You know, are we inherently more caring or more warlike? You know, all this stuff, it's all up for grabs because nobody really knows how much is the influence of the society and the expectations placed on very young ones and how absorbed they are, or what comes from within, and it's almost like in our DNA, you know, it's sort of genetically driven. Nobody knows because there's no absolute state. What we have come to know is that identity is a kind of shifting and subjective thing that is reinforced by different societies in different ways and at different times. So I think it's an ongoing question.
It's just an idea, but someone who like lived kind of through ideas, I guess, was Quentin Crisp. I mean, what was that like working with him?
Well, it was a complete joy. As I said at the time, he was the true and only Queen of England. And truly regal, truly divine, suffered for who he was, and it was an enormous sacrifice coming back to England to shoot, but then I guess if he was going to come back at all, it would have to be as, the Queen of England. So.
Right.
He was great, he was wonderful, and it was always very moving being with him. I always felt I was with a hero. I loved him. Every filmmaker, whenever talks to who's made anything that's worth watching, seems to have gone through some kind of enormous struggle to get there. I've never met a filmmaker who said, that was really easy. And I think most artists, by virtue of being artists, feel to some degree outsiders, misunderstood and unsupported. So, success is measured in terms of box office in film, or how much money something has made, and that means that we live in a risk-averse time for anything that seems to be unpredictable, edgier, don't know how many people will like it, and so on. But that's exactly how it was making Orlando. There were, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rejections. Nobody wanted to make it. Everybody thought it could never work. Not only that, but sort of shouldn't be made somehow morally.
I saw your archive, and it totally changes. I mean, I could have an experience with Orlando through all this other material that isn't film, and it's really amazing. So, I mean, how do you see those possibilities, like changing the way we experience what a film is?
A huge adventure and really exciting. No, I think it offers enormous opportunities and great and unknown ways for people to explore other people's work and to make their own work, to find a public, to find a niche, or to spread things virally. And what remains constant is how extremely difficult it is to make good work and make anything that's worth distributing virally or in anything else. So that doesn't become easier just because the tools have changed.
And one last thing I wanted to ask, what the kind of role dance plays in your work, because a lot of your early experiences came from that.
Yeah. Well, I think kind of once a dancer, always a dancer. Although I wish I could now in the way that I once did. But I think it puts into your bones a feeling for movement that's very useful for a filmmaker. Because we're always thinking about point of view, bodies in space, and the body as a whole, not just a kind of talking head, but the head and the words and so on are part of a total physical experience that a human being is. And choreographically speaking, that every decision within a frame is a movement decision, whether it's left to right, right to left, forward to back to forward, or static. These are all kind of choreographic decisions. So I think dance is actually as good a starting point as any for directing film. Each film feels like, the last film feels like the teacher of the next. And at the moment I've kind of got that big screen hunger again. So I'd quite like to make another film that would go back to the collective viewing experience on a bigger scale again.